Now we'll take a look at the 20th century, which sees a huge shift in the nature of punishment away from sort of retribution and deterrent towards rehabilitation. One way in which this is seen is through the abolishment of capital punishment in 1969. It was a gradual process with incremental changes over time, for example, starting in 1908 with the changing of the death penalty for under 16s. What you see, the reason for the abolishment of capital punishment is a combination of changing social attitudes and a number of controversial cases, these being Timothy Evans in 1950, who was accused of killing his wife and child. He was convicted based on the testimony of his neighbour John Christie. Evans was then executed, but then in 1953, John Christie, who testified at the trial, was discovered to be a serial killer, and Timothy Evans was posthumously, that means after his death, pardoned, as in found not guilty of the crime. Next, you had the case of Derek Bentley in 1953, who was stealing from a warehouse. When the police arrived, Bentley's friend, Christopher Craig, shot and killed the police officer, Officer Fairfax. Christopher Craig was only 16, so couldn't be hanged. However, authorities were determined to make an example of somebody to deter people from committing crimes against authority. Derek Bentley, therefore, was punished instead under the grounds of common shared purpose. Bentley only had the mental age of an 11-year-old and was easily led and followed others. He shouted during the course of the crime, "Let him have it." This could have been in reference to give the officer the gun or shoot the officer. People believed the police and the judge wanted revenge, as it was one of their own who had been killed, and this led to a public protesting about the execution. 200 members of parliament signed the petition for Bentley's pardon, but he was executed anyway. This caused a huge scandal. Bentley was later pardoned in 1998, and his execution shows the failure of the system. The final one was Ruth Ellis in 1955. She had been in an abusive relationship for years with David Blakely. 3 months before the murder, Blakely had punched Ellis in the stomach and she'd had a miscarriage. She shot him dead, but because the murder was premeditated, the law stated she had to be executed. The law, in short, the law did not allow for the mitigating circumstances of Ruth Ellis's mental condition at the time of the murder. She was effectively convicted after one question only, which was, "What did you intend to do when you shot him?" And she said, "I intended to kill him." The jury deliberated for only 29 minutes before finding her guilty. This is a huge miscarriage of justice, and what it shows is the law wasn't capable of allowing for the mitigating factors behind her crime. You also see other changes in punishments led by attitudes of society, a shift towards dealing with root causes of crime, as in wanting to change a person's character, the growth of rehabilitation. For example, you get probation officers, which gives people a chance to grow and establish a trusting relationship with authority figures. Early release and responsibility allows criminals to reintegrate into society. You also got the introduction of borstals, largely successful for young offenders, focused on physical discipline, hard work, and re-education. Another shift towards rehabilitation is shown by open prisons. Not all criminals were sent to high-security prisons. Open prisons are used for low-risk offenders. They allow prisoners to build more freedom and trust. Open prisons means inmates can move between rooms and buildings and show trust and give prisoners responsibility. These are also used for criminals who have been in other prisons previously but are approaching release, and they use these open prisons as like a step in the way to reintegrating them into society. Yet the abolishment of corporal punishment in 1948, which meant no more beatings in prison, the idea of leniency and rehabilitation. Corporal punishment means punishment against the body. You also see community sentencing, for example, non-custodial sentences, non-prison sentences. Government want less people in prison, so they introduce things like tags and community service, repaying debts to society. The idea of repaying debts to society is the idea of restitution. You also get restorative justice. Criminals meet people affected by their crimes so they can see the impact of them. The idea being that this hopes to give the criminal effectively an epiphany about the impact of their crimes and show remorse. They can see firsthand how their crime has affected people. The principal focus is rehabilitation to cut reoffending. must attack the root cause of crimes, for example, drug dependency. People still reoffend and it creates a revolving door. Rehabilitation is reliant on people wanting to reform. Okay, so we're seeing a shift towards rehabilitation with the idea being to stop this revolving door. Hard to rehabilitate people who have not been habilitated. So that means rehabilitation means reintroduce people to society or reintegrate them to society. Very difficult if somebody's been off the rails from the start. Finally, in the 20th century, we want to discuss how new are new crimes. Realistically, most of them not very. The same crimes, just done in a different way. We've got smuggling. Attitudes towards smuggling have stayed the same throughout history, really. People have the same attitudes towards smuggling legal goods, such as cigarettes. However, when the goods are harmful, attitudes change and smuggling becomes controversial. Slavery, it used to be the triangular trade and with Africa. However, modern slavery still exists in the form of human trafficking. Crimes such as fraud. Nowadays, we have telephone, computer, email, phishing scams, as in trying to get your information or getting you to input information. You also get credit card readers on ATMs. In the past, we looked at the criminal very briefly of Jonathan Wild, who would steal people's goods and then pretend he was a vigilante who could get them their goods back, and they would pay him for this service. Genuinely new crimes are computer crime, due to technology, and car crime, again due to technology.